So now that you have a bit of project background, we're going to move on to the protocol and collection tips. And this presentation will provide guidance to team leads and data collectors involved in collecting seed for Project Wingspan, and will provide information, protocols, and forms related to the project to standardize the data collection process. And one of our core goals with this project is to train volunteers in how to properly conduct a seed collection. And we hope that the skills you learn through Project Wingspan will transfer and enable you to contribute to community conservation projects in the future. The Project Wingspan is a large project with a lot of moving parts. And as such, there are several tiers of responsibility to keep everything moving forward and ensure that no one person is saddled with all the work. Elizabeth Kaufman and I, Amber Barnes, are the Pollinator Partnership Program Leads, overseeing the overseeing and organizing the program with the help of our core partners, as well as leading trainings and managing the seed collection and distribution effort. We're here to answer any programmatic questions you may have. We also have state coordinators for each of our 6 target states. These coordinators will be working directly with our volunteers to support and coordinate efforts within their respective state. They will be in charge of identifying, organizing, and assisting with the training of our seed collection teams and are the go-to reference on regional questions. They're actively coordinating with team leads and assisting with permitting and identifying potential collection locations. Team leads are the local on-the-ground volunteer leads throughout each state. State coordinators will set them up with a team and help them to find a collection site if they don't already have one. From there, they'll work with their state coordinator to obtain any necessary permits, learn our 29 target species, and scout out the sites to identify populations and coordinate with their team to schedule and lead collection events. They may or may not collect data, and they'll oversee the drying and shipping of the seed to Mason State Nursery. Many teams have opted to have co-leads and divide these tasks, which has been very effective. And there's also collection volunteers, and these people are responsible for learning our 29 target species, becoming familiar with the collection protocol, attending seed collection events, and submitting their volunteer hours online. And if they desire to be more involved, many team leads have often welcomed additional help with scouting locations, collecting data, or other tasks. And they're encouraged just to reach out and let their team lead know if they're interested. It's extremely important that individuals collecting seed for Project Wingspan are well trained so that the plant species are properly identified, plant populations are not harmed during the collection process, and the protocol is followed. Local training workshops and a training manual have been developed to aid team leads and volunteers, as well as this online training module to provide resources online and allow for additional volunteers to join collection teams throughout the span of the project. Project Wingspan team leads and volunteer seed collectors can communicate with the Pollinator Partnership to obtain contact information for their state coordinator and regional support members. While we're prioritizing wild seed collections, we're most certainly open to working anywhere with populations large enough for a collection. So collections can take place on private lands or lands managed by other federal agencies, state, county, or municipal agencies, as long as landowner permission is provided. Many groups, organizations, and individuals have joined this initiative to allow seed collection on their lands. And we welcome any connections you have to groups such as the following: National Association of Conservation Districts, American Farm Bureau Federation, Master Naturalists groups, Master Gardening groups, farm cooperatives, land trusts, and parks and their friends groups as well. And state coordinators have been working with partners throughout the state to find suitable seed collection sites. But if you have a site you think might be interested in participating as a collection location, please let us know. Team leads are welcome to make these connections themselves through their network, and we'll supply you with a toolkit of resources. We have several documents to help explain what Project Wingspan is, and links set up for people or organizations to sign up as collection sites, volunteer collectors, as well as information on our habitat survey. But if you would prefer, you can also pass this information along to your state coordinator, and they can reach out to the site to see if they're interested in participating. It's important to make sure that you never enter a site without first getting permission. These are forms that we will need to have on file for each collection. So if a seed collection will occur on state lands or rights-of-way areas, a right of entry permit must be obtained, as well as notification of your presence in regard to date, time, and total persons that will be on site. Right of entry permits can be obtained from district or county Department of Transportation offices, state park offices, and so on. You'll need to plan ahead, though. You'll not get a permit overnight. So if you're a team lead and have arranged with your state coordinator to obtain your collection permit, you will need to make sure to have a copy of that permit on hand when you visit the site. Additionally, you'll need to sign and make sure all of your team of volunteers have also signed their hold harmless document, the volunteer waiver. And that will release your state coordinator and their associated institution from any damage that might inadvertently occur while you're utilizing a permit in the name of a third party. And we also have permission forms that can be used when a site doesn't have a specific permit process that needs to be followed. In order to set up a collection, the state coordinator and team leads will need to obtain that permission to enter the site and collect seed. Afterwards, they can scout and assess the habitats for our target species. And these next few slides will go over how to scout and assess a site. So what makes a population? Well, for our project, we consider a population to be a group of one species of plants living within the same collection site that is continuous in range, and these plants are generally uniform in appearance, and that is one population. Because bees can travel up to 3 miles, and monarchs and some of our other large butterflies can travel even further, that means that pollen is being exchanged within a 3-mile radius of your collection site. So if you need more seeds and you have the permission, you can look outside of your original immediate site and you can combine those collections with your main site. So really anything within that 3-mile radius around your main collection site is considered the same population. And to gain the most balanced sample of seed, we want to make sure that we're collecting in an even and random method from at least 50 plants, but most certainly more whenever possible. And different collections of the same species should be at least a 1/4 mile apart to ensure that they are indeed 2 separate populations. And because graphics can be more easily understood than a bunch of words, here's a nice diagram that illustrates those points. So as you can see, the red circles are the 3-mile radius that a large pollinator could travel from the center of your collection area, and that would be one collection of this yellow flower. If a few miles away, a minimum of a 1/4 mile, there's another population of that yellow flower, that would be considered a separate collection of that species. And if you have a different species, in this case a blue flower, that overlaps your 2 separate yellow populations, that is totally fine. There won't be any gene transfer between the blue and yellow flowers, so that can be a collection site for the blue flowers, even though it overlaps those other populations. And in fact, it's definitely preferred if you can find a collection site with multiple species from our target list. And you may not need to do many of these steps. So for how to assess a population, you may not have to do all these steps, but it'll depend on the location of the seed collection. When collecting from a park, a botanist or naturalist on staff may be able to complete many of these steps. The state coordinator, site partner, and team lead will coordinate on these efforts to work out a plan. You don't want to show up at a site just to find out your species aren't there or have already gone to seed. The teams that have committed to collecting seed for Project Wingspan will need to begin by making site visits. Preliminary site visits are often necessary to assess populations, confirm the identification and the location of the species, and estimate the likely harvesting date and potential for seed production. The target population should have at minimum 50 harvestable plants, which a collection can be made. And this will ensure that adequate genetic diversity can be sampled from the population and that the seeds are likely to be at maximum viability and longevity. And again, it's important that a knowledgeable botanist or someone with strong plant identification skills conducts the preliminary site visits and is involved in the identifying of the plants and the most suitable populations for seed collection. Where populations are suitable and the quality and quantity of the seed is adequate, it may be possible to make collections of multiple target species from the same site. Additionally, team leads will know their volunteers best and can determine at the preliminary site visit if populations should be marked for their volunteer collection teams to help them return to the appropriate area when the seeds mature. As the landscape changes from spring to summer to fall, it can be really useful to mark those areas with a flag tape or pin flags or something like that, so that when you come back later in the season and the vegetation has changed, you can still find that location. But you always want to check with that landowner and make sure that it's okay to do something like that. So how do you determine if a seed is ready? Well, you'll want to conduct one method is to conduct a seed cut test, but there's also the ability to do visual assessments of the seed. So when you're visually assessing the seed, you want to ensure that you can see that there will be changes in the fruit and seed color. You can see in these photos of the Zizia aurea or golden Alexander many of these characteristics. So looking for these changes in fruit or seed color, these fruits can be splitting or breaking open if they're in a pod or a seed head of that type. In some cases, the seeds may rattle within that seed capsule. Seeds will become harder and dry, and some seeds will have already naturally dispersed. And a cut test is one way to know if the seed is viable. And what a cut test is it's a method of testing seeds by cutting them open and a cross section and taking a look at their internal tissues to make sure that they're fully developed and undamaged. And this can tell the collector a few different things. One, it can tell you if the seeds are mature enough, but it can also let you know if the seeds have been damaged. So, if insects have infested them and damaged the seeds, and can be an aid in determining the amount of seed needed. So, for instance, if you are at a population and you do a cut test and you notice that anything greater than 30% has been damaged and is no longer viable due to insects, depending on the size of the population, you may either just want to not do a collection there if it's a smaller population, or if there's thousands of individuals that are harvestable, you'll just want to ensure that you are collecting more plants than you normally would to ensure that you're making up for that loss of viability from that 30% that have been impacted by insects. So how you perform a cut test, you can utilize a razor blade and cut seed longitudinally on a firm surface. And you'll want to push that razor blade downwards in the middle of the seed with constant pressure and get a nice cross section. And from there, you can examine those seed contents. I've also found that you can utilize some masking tape and nail clippers, which is far more field friendly and a nice way to still be able to get a nice cross section of your seeds. And so plants will not shed their seed until they're at maximum viability. So when you get to a site, you'll want to compare the seeds and pods that are at their natural distribution phase and the ones that are not, in order to avoid collecting undeveloped seed. And there's multiple ways that you can look at this and do both that visual assessment as well as that seed cut. So with a mature seed, you will usually have a much harder outer seed coat. It'll be fully developed embryo and will tend to be a bit more plump depending on the seed shape. Immature seed, on the other hand, will tend to have a softer outer seed coat. Their inner tissues can be milky and just generally not as firm as those found in a mature seed. And it can be a lot easier to cut those open with your thumbnail, for instance. And then empty seeds will likely be the result of insect damage or simply failure to fully mature. And these can be slim, and when you cut them open, they can appear empty. So now that we have a good idea of what a population is, how to assess it, when a seed is in fact mature enough for a collection, it's important to talk about what to collect. And in order to reduce the likelihood of contamination of our seeds by insects, fungus, or other undesirable factors, it's important to only collect the seed heads, seed pods, and seed itself whenever possible. Please do not collect any excess materials such as stems and leaves whenever possible. And when stems are necessary, in the case of a fluffy seed you just need to get in your bag before it blows away, please remove them before shipping to the seed cleaning facility. So what doesn't go into the bag? Well, of course, weeds. And while it may seem silly to list weeds on this, we know that our collection volunteers are environmental stewards and would not intentionally contaminate our collections with this kind of seed. But there are many ways you can accidentally allow seeds into your bag. And so a couple examples of ways you can remain mindful while navigating a seed collection site is to keep your bag closed when walking through the site from one plant to the next. And what this does is it allows you to avoid seed dropping into your bag as you disturb those surrounding plants. Also, when collecting with two hands and setting the bag on the ground, you may want to ensure that nothing weedy is above you or around you that you might be bumping into that could fall into your open container. And also just being mindful of your clothing and making sure that, as you walk through the site, that weed seeds that may attach themselves, become hitchhikers on your sleeves, that you brush them off before putting your arms back in the bag as you add additional material. Of course, no collection is ever going to be insect-free, but do your best to avoid plants that appear infested with insects, with noticeable damage to the seed heads, the seed pods. And rocks, clippers, and sunglasses. Again, these might seem silly to list, but often these materials may get set in a bag either for safekeeping or to weigh the bag down. And they can accidentally be either shipped to Mason State Nursery, which has expensive seed cleaning machines, and it's important that no rogue materials accidentally get included with the seed and inserted into their machines. But also they might just get left behind, and the team leads then end up having to find the owners of these sunglasses, these clippers, and such, and then get those back out to the group. So it's just best to, before you turn in your collection bucket, collection bag, to ensure that all personal items are removed and nothing that isn't plant material is still in there. And I can't say it enough, you definitely need to beware of weeds. So if a collection is found to be contaminated with weed seeds, it'll need to be discarded in order to ensure that this program is not accidentally spreading weeds. We don't want all of the hard work that goes into scouting, planning, collecting, and cleaning seed to go to waste. So please be careful about what gets picked, and what ends up in that bag and bucket isn't under a weed when you're collecting your target species. So for collecting techniques, seeds should be collected following proper seed collection protocol. And we follow the Bureau of Land Management's Seeds of Success program, where we do not exceed 20% seed harvested. And so it's important to collect widely throughout the whole site. You don't want to stay in one small area, as those plants might be related. They might be spreading rhizominously. So it's fantastic to collect from those areas, but it's important to also collect widely from the site. And you also want to make sure to include plants that are in different microhabitats throughout the site. So whether that's an area that's slightly wetter, slightly drier, has a steeper area, by collecting from those various areas, you're really improving the genetics of the collection as a whole. And you don't want to avoid plants that just simply look different or smaller than some of the others of the same species. You want to avoid observation bias of only collecting from things that are, hip high. So look for plants that are lower to the ground, a little higher. Collect from those that are lush, but also the ones that might be a little scraggly, because the characteristics that those plants have, while they might not be fantastic in the present conditions, they might be very valuable in wetter, drier, or warmer conditions. So really getting that genetic variation. And only collecting from either every fifth plant, everything from every fifth plant, or collecting 20% of every plant you pass. And the technique for this may vary based on plant species and what is makes the most sense for the type of the seed pod or seed head. What's really important is that we allow 80% of the seed present to remain on the site, to carry out its natural biological functions, to reseed that population, to provide habitat, and to provide nourishment for the other wildlife that utilize this area. So how much seed is in an ideal collection? Well, after thoroughly cleaning, testing, cataloging, and handling the seed, this is really time-consuming work, and our partners at Mason State Nursery recommend that a collection results in no less than 1 ounce of cleaned seed. Of course, collections resulting in larger than 1 ounce are encouraged whenever possible. The more seed we can get, the more habitat acres we can enhance. On this slide are a few photos to illustrate, what an ounce of a few of these target species look like, with a can of pop for reference. So once you've began seed collection process, you'll need to carefully examine a small representative sample of seeds to make sure they have a developed embryo. You can cut those seeds open with a knife and examine them with the hands lens in the field to be extra certain. In general, though, a seed will be dry, dark, and relatively loose in its shell if it's ripe. And again, some seeds are simply too small for a cut test. So utilizing all of those different visual diagnostics are important for really ascertaining if that seed is ready. And you will want to collect mature, dry seeds that are relatively insect-free and put those into your bag or your bucket. Large collections can be made using plastic buckets and then transferred into bags. And if you're unsure if the seed is actually ripe, you can also collect 2 times, so earlier in the season and later in the season, to ensure a really robust collection. Be sure to take care of your seeds after they're collected. Do not allow collections to overheat. You don't want to leave them in a vehicle in the full sun. Exposure to sustained high temperatures can badly damage seed collections. So maintaining ventilation around the collections at all times and trying to park the collection vehicle in the shade, or at the very least to shade the windshield. And while you don't want to collect any damp collections, you want to make sure that any morning dew has burned off, and if it rained the day before, you might want to hold off a day for the collection. But you'll still have some residual moisture in there. So anything that might have some dampness, you'll definitely want to spread out on newspaper to naturally dry in a well-ventilated area immediately after the collection. It's very important to remember to label your seed in the field. Whether you intend to or not, you'll likely forget pertinent information before you get back to your car or the office. So this information should be recorded on your collection bag while in the field, especially if you're collecting from multiple species in the same day, as some of the species may look somewhat similar. So you want to make sure that those bags are clearly marked. We will be utilizing a online or a phone application to document photos of the sites. At least 3 photos should be taken for each collection, the landscape level, individual plants, and then the material collected. And this provides us with a digital voucher that we can use if there are any questions at Mason State, if they think things may have been mislabeled. We haven't needed to do that, but it's just one more way to ensure that we have that data integrity and all those checks and balances. And you're welcome to take these photos with your mobile device and input them directly into the GIS app that we'll talk a little bit about later. And we also need information about the collection event and the sites collected using a field data sheet. The field data form, like the GIS app, should be filled out while in the field. Each unique collection of a species will get its own form, and even if multiple species were collected at the same site at the same time. However, if you do have to revisit a site later to get more individuals seed for the collection, you can put that seed on the same data form. So if you go out for a collection of common milkweed and only half of the pods were ready, and you go back a week later to that same site and collect, still that 20%, but a little bit more to get that 50 individuals, you would just add that to that same data form since it's the same population. And these data forms are really important for keeping everything organized and collecting vital information about the collection site and the species present. And a copy of this sheet will be sent with the seeds to the cleaning facility in order to allow them to catalog and make sure that all of the seed collections are processed correctly. But then a copy will be kept by the team lead for their own records as well. And we've created a seed collection tracking sheet to assist our team leads and data collectors in staying organized. And this is a master list that'll help you know what the collection site ID should be for the next collection, and will help reduce duplicate IDs for separate collections. You can also track when they were collected and when they were shipped to keep track of everything nicely. So Project Wingspan collecting teams will be using a special format to identify their collections called the Seed Collection Reference Number. And it'll include 3 parts: the Seed Collection Team Reference ID, which is your state abbreviation and collection team number, the project site ID, represented by the letters A through Z, and the collection number. And so your collection ID will be assigned by your state coordinator, and the site ID and collection numbers will be consecutive over the season. And so we have another diagram to illustrate this. So in this case, we've got an Illinois collection team 1, and they've done 3 different collections. 2 of those collections were from site A. So you've got Illinois collection team 1, site A, and then collection 1 of the yellow flower. They went back later and they did another collection from that same site. So still site A, but this is collection 2. It's their second collection of the season. And a week or so later, they went and they found they had this great population at site B. And so it's still Illinois collection team 1, but now it's B, and it's their 3rd collection of the season. So ILCT1 B3. As you can see, each population gets its own collection number. Each site gets its own site ID. And collection numbers don't start over for each site. They run consecutively throughout the season. And the field data form is a critical part of every collection. As I said before, a copy of this form will be kept by the team lead for their records, and a copy will be sent with the seeds for cataloging at Mason State Nursery. Only the team lead or data collector will need to fill this out. And this form not only gives us vital information about the site and the collection, but can also be used by the team leads as a scouting sheet for future collections of target species that are observed while carrying out a collection. And these can also be utilized as Project Wingspan is a 2-year project. These can be utilized for future conservation projects by these team members. So it's a nice record of what is at these sites, what's been collected in the past that can fuel future conservation on these local areas. And so in the appendix B of the seed collection manual, we have both a blank field data form and an example of one filled out. And this slide has that mock collection information that's included on that filled out example. So you can take a look, and maybe you'd want to pause here and fill out the data collection form and see if you filled it out right. And then you can take a look at the filled out example and see if everything matches up. And here is the filled out form in digital version for your reference as well. So once the seed has been collected, the data has been collected, the seed will need to be dried for at least 3 days prior to shipping. And you want to dry this in a dry, dark area with low humidity. If you have a lot of space, it's great to lay the seed out in a 1 layer thick on newspaper, or if you have a old window screen or something like that that you can prop up on a bucket, you can lay it on that, and then you get drying from the top and the bottom. It can also be useful, if the seed won't fly away, to put a fan on its lowest setting and just have that gently blowing over the seed. And this can help expedite that drying process. If you do not have a lot of space, you can leave the seed in the bag, but you want to leave the bag open and make sure to stir the seeds at least once a day. Sometimes more, especially if there's a little bit more residual moisture in there. And in this case, a fan on its lowest setting, gently blowing over that bag, is definitely recommended. And storing seeds. We don't recommend that you store the seeds for a long time. Holding them up to a week or so in order to send them in bulk is fine, but you don't want to store them for multiple months and send all the collections at once. But if there's a holiday week or something and you're not able to get those seeds sent out immediately after drying, it's important to do a few things to make sure that store seed is going to be at that maximum viability. So you'll want to clean the seed pretty thoroughly, make sure to remove all chaff, any sort of stem or leaf or anything not directly attached to the seed. You'll want to put that seed, make sure it is being stored in a paper bag so it has that breathability. And you'll want to keep that in a dry, dark room that is cool. You never want to freeze them, but that will be cooler and with low humidity until they can be mailed. And if you ever are transferring a bag from the collection bag that's labeled into a different bag, make sure to transfer all of that labeling information. So a few other things to keep in mind, of course, are safety concerns. So we care about your own personal safety, but also the safety of the site. And we'll also talk briefly about the GIS app, but there will be a separate tutorial video for that. So things to keep in mind when you're out in the field is be careful whenever handling milkweed pods, especially that sap can react with your skin, and some people are more sensitive than others. But it can also be damaging to your eyes if you get into your eyes. So with any of these plants, you definitely want to be mindful as some of the sap can react with your skin. So don't touch your face. Make sure you're not touching your eyes. In some cases, you might just simply want to wear gloves. Either way, you want to make sure that you wash your hands thoroughly at the end of the day to make sure that you get all of those residual materials off. And if you do get any milkweed sap or other plant materials in your eyes or things like that, you may want to seek medical attention, and especially if you have any sort of allergic reaction. And be sure to discuss any allergies with your team to ensure that everybody is aware, and again, keeping that safety in mind. It's also important to remember to hydrate. And we recommend taking at least a liter of water with you out into the field, especially on those hot July and August days, making sure to stay properly hydrated. Anytime that you are working along a roadside, being sure to wear bright clothes and not collecting along busy highways. And as a team, it's always important to check for ticks and chiggers, and before people head out of the field site, doing a once over and ensuring that all the team members have done a tick check and everybody looks good. And an additional way to prevent ticks from being able to get lodged is to keep your socks, your pants tucked into your socks, your shirt tucked into your pants, and apply bug spray before going out into the field. And these are all great ways to reduce the likelihood of ticks getting onto your body. You also will want to keep an eye out for things like poison ivy, poison oak, poison sumac, and wild parsnip while out in the field, and make sure to avoid all of those plants. And in natural resources work, including seed collections, equipment and organisms are often moved from one location to another. And this provides the potential for the spread of non-target species to invade new habitat. And non-target species are the plants, animals, diseases, pathogens, and parasites that are not intended to be moved. And as responsible environmental stewards, it's essential that we do our best to reduce the impact and prevent the movement of invasive and weedy species whenever possible. So some steps to do that is to educate yourself. Learn to identify problem weeds you may encounter, and be able to make sure that you avoid those when you're out in the field. It's easy to learn to identify many of the problem weeds, and you can find a host of free identification guides through many of the various local natural resource departments, fish and wildlife, soil and water conservation districts, many of these various organizations will have some great resources available. You'll also want to make sure that you're coming to your seed collection site clean. So before leaving home, take a little time to inspect your gear, remove any dirt, plants, or seeds from clothing, boots, gear, and vehicles. And whenever possible, wear low-tread footwear that doesn't hold soils, seeds, plant parts, or invertebrates. And while you're out on the site, pay attention to your surroundings. Avoid parking in any weedy patches. Most weeds spread along roadways, as vehicles can easily transport many types of weed seeds. So you may want to avoid parking in weedy spots, but also when you're out on the site, avoid walking through weed patches to reduce the amount of seeds that you may transport as hitchhikers. And of course, you want to leave that site clean. So before you leave the site, carefully inspect yourself and your equipment at the end of your trip. Weed seeds will cling to most materials, so be sure to carefully check everything. Use items like a stiff brush, stick, or a small screwdriver to help remove soils, seeds, plant parts, or invertebrates, and use boot brushes and other removal devices when possible. You do not clean clothing, footwear, or gear near waterways. This might promote the spread of invasive species downstream. To be extra precautious, you can also put together a 70% alcohol solution to spray and sanitize boots and equipment. So with Project Wingspan, Pollinator Partnership will be paying for the shipment of seeds, but we do need the team leads to box up those seeds and ship them. So we're utilizing the United States Postal Service, and you'll ship your seeds directly to Mason State Nursery. Now, you do not want to mail your seeds out on a Thursday or a Friday to ensure that those seeds are not sitting out in a uncontrolled environment out in the rain or getting baked by the sun out on a doorstep. So you'll always want to check the estimated delivery before mailing to ensure that the seed arrives before the weekend. And again, you'll want to keep a copy of that field data form for yourself, but make sure to send a copy with that collection as well. And make sure that bag is also labeled. Now, you can get free United States Postal Service priority mail flat rate boxes from your local post office. So you can just go in, let them know what you need, and they'll give you a stack of them for free. And we will be utilizing the United States Postal Service website. So you can sign in, and the team leads will be given login information from their state coordinator. And so you will get the login information both for the United States Postal Service as well as for the affiliated PayPal account. And that's how Pollinator Partnership pays for the shipping. And we've got a detailed step-by-step directions in the seed collection manual that walks you through every step of how to fill out this form. And once you've reached the end of the click and ship shipping and filled everything out, you will pay for the postage, and it'll generate a label, and you'll print that label, securely tape it to the top of the box, and then you can either hand deliver that package to the United States Postal Service, post office, or schedule a pickup with your daily mail pickup if that's an option. Just make sure that the package is received by a postal worker on the same day, and that within your control, that package is never left in an uncontrolled, hot, or humid environment. So if you're going to drop the seed off at the post office, make sure that you're not running a few other errands around that day, and those seeds don't get left in the car, in the sun, in the heat until you're able to get to the post office. So just be mindful of that. And again, you can see the seed collection protocol, and the state coordinator will get you that login information. So as I said, we are partnering with the University of Arkansas Center for Advanced Spatial Technologies, CAST, and they've come up with a mobile application to capture the geospatial distribution of our collections. CAST is using the Survey 123 for ArcGIS application, and they've created a survey form that allows us to capture the GPS coordinates and other characteristics of each seed collection. This will go into a secure database that will be used to help us redistribute the seed back onto the landscape. And it also functions as a photo library to ensure that the correct species are being collected. And these photos are also helpful for outreach and education about monarchs, seed collection, and this project. Brian Culpepper, our partner with the University of Arkansas, will be creating has created a online tutorial. So for data collectors and state leads, you can visit that video to look at a step-by-step on how to download, access, and utilize the Survey 123 app. And there's also a very thorough section in the seed collection manual with screenshots that goes through every step for filling out the online form. And so not only is this work important, but it's also really fun. So please feel free to take photos and send us pictures of your collection teams in action. We can use these photos to promote the vital on-the-ground work that our volunteers are doing and raise awareness about the decline of the monarch butterfly, the rusty patched bumblebee, and our other imperiled pollinators. And you can feel free to send them to me, Amber Barnes, or your local state coordinator. And also, one of the many important measures for a grant funding agencies look at to judge the success of a project is community involvement and volunteer support. And so it's important for us to understand the various affiliations and time spent by our volunteers so that we can report this back to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation as an in-kind match of time. These records can also be beneficial to a volunteer to track because in some states, depending on your income, you may be able to use this information as a tax write-off. So what are next steps? Well, if you are interested in becoming a team lead, co-lead, or data collector, please let us know. Your state coordinator will be organizing collection teams, and they'll be in touch soon to assign volunteers to the nearest team. These team leads will then introduce themselves to their team members and contact them when seed collection events are in the works. And we will be continuing to train new collection team volunteers with our online training module, and we'll be sending out an email to announce this module and make sure to spread the word far and wide. So thank you so much for tuning into today's webinar covering the basics of Project Wingspan. If you're watching this to complete a portion of the online training, please make sure to complete the rest of the training on the website. And after watching this presentation, if you are interested in leading or collecting data for a seed collection team, please reach out to your state coordinator to let them know. And their contact information for each coordinator is listed on this slide. Remember, the overall goal is to provide much needed habitat for the monarch butterfly, rusty patched bumblebee, and our other imperiled pollinators. Thank you so much for your interest in pollinator conservation. We look forward to the potential to have you help collect seed for Project Wingspan. Please feel free to contact us if you have any questions. And we understand that there are many different volunteer opportunities, and we really value that you're looking into ours in this real on-the-ground conservation initiatives that we're taking that can take local conservation and bring it into the landscape level impact. So thank you so much. Looking forward to touching base soon. Wow. I don't think I ever feel good after finishing something.